as much as we can be talking about childcare, how, so far it's sort of a failed system and it really needs a lot of help and effort from the candidates who are running. Make sure that they know it's important to us. That's really going to be huge for the upcoming election system.
Hello, hello. This is Samantha Saxby with another episode of Moms with Benefits. And today we're talking to Rachel. And I am very, very excited about the conversation today. So, Rachel is a mom of an almost 2-year-old son named Liam. She's located in Pennsylvania. And throughout her journey of entering motherhood, she's had some struggles she's going to share with us related to childcare that's actually helped her evolve and advocate for Campaign for Childcare, an organization that she's going to tell us more about as well. So, super excited to talk with Rachel today. Welcome, Rachel.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This is really exciting.
Yeah, I can't wait to learn more about your specific entrance into motherhood and the work in the advocacy that you're doing for Campaign for Childcare. So, I want to hear what being a working mom means to you personally.
This is a question that I actually struggled a little bit with after becoming a mom. I had a pretty rough postpartum period, just kind of mental health wise. And I really questioned whether or not I wanted to return back into the traditional workforce. The way that my family is set up, I was sort of the breadwinner. I wasn't prepared to give up that financial contribution to the family. And then also the more that I got out of that postpartum sort of fog and period, I really realized that continuing to work on something that I have passion for and that can allows me to kind of exercise my brain in a different way every day, solve different challenges and kind of puzzles related to my work. I really valued that. And that was a huge part of maintaining my own identity outside of motherhood.
Yeah, I resonate with you that you went through this period of questioning, entering back into the quote traditional workforce. So I want to pull on that thread a little bit more if you're comfortable. Kind of what specifically were you questioning? I heard, you weren't prepared to give up the financial income part of it. Were there other things that you were questioning?
I really had a strong pull to just stay home with Liam. I had such a hard time kind of separating myself from him, which I think is really normal, but I was not prepared for it whatsoever before it happened. Unfortunately, sort of a situation we ran into early on with his daycare and childcare kind of like, again, led me into a little bit of a spiral. We got very lucky in finding a spot and everything while I was pregnant, before he was even born. And his daycare is incredible. But about a month after he started, which again, when he started, that sent me into like a just, I'm not ready to be away from him. I went back after 16 weeks. So, he's pretty little, and handing him over to somebody was really difficult for me. But then a month after he started, we got an email saying, hey, we haven't been profitable since June of 2019. Like, we're going to have to let some families go. If you want to volunteer, that would be awesome. And so that really, sent me into okay, do I have to leave my job? Can we keep him in this spot? What if he loses his spot? What's that going to mean for us? Because we do not live near family. My parents are 8 hours away, and we have no one in our immediate community that could help take care of him while we tried to figure this out. So,
Wow. So, okay. So let's think about the math there. So he got into daycare around 16 weeks old. So that's what, like
hmm
4 months old. And then a month later, he's 5 months old. You're 5 months postpartum.
yep.
And they're like,
A month
hey,
back to work. Yeah.
right. Oh my gosh. And so I imagine you're probably like a month into being like, all right, I'm trying to figure out how to work and have a 4 month old and like be this new person that I'm transforming into. And then life is like, here you go. Here's another curveball.
Exactly. Right. Right.
Yeah.
And just,
Okay.
barely having the mental energy to contribute to my job and being a mom, and then also having this other thing on top of it to have to plan, for the worst case scenario. So, yeah,
Yeah.
it was
Okay.
rough.
So what did you do? Did you volunteer? Did they force, people out? Like this I need to know what happened.
Yeah. So thankfully, we got very fortunate and lucky that they were okay with us being one of the families that stayed on. But specifically, they were looking for infant families to volunteer because cost wise, infants are so much more of a cost for childcare centers to run just because of the ratios that they need and everything like that. So yeah, I was really concerned, but thankfully it all ended up working out. This experience and kind of panic sort of bonded me a little bit with our childcare center owner. And she knows that I've been involved in some childcare advocacy. And so, kind of the good and the bad, she fills me in all the time about consistent struggles that she's still having now over a year later. And, it just really kind of hits home for me how dire the situation still is. And at any time, honestly, I feel like we could lose our spot. And then again, I'd be in the same place all over again. So.
Yeah, yeah. So we're gonna dive into the advocacy work that you do for childcare. Before we get there, I want to ask a follow-up question of how you navigated and worked through the implications and the different consequences of feeling like childcare is such a financial cost for you, and how you relate that back to the conversations you had with your family and the decisions that you were making as a breadwinner, because that's a lot of like our listeners are trying to figure out. They are the breadwinners, they are very career driven, but they have this relationship with childcare to navigate. And so I just want to hear more color about your experience there.
Absolutely. So for me, it was very much a consideration of short term versus long term. I knew that, again, making my salary as it is now and then staying in the workforce to hopefully, again, make progression, get promoted, and the kind of other benefits like 401k contributions from my company, things like that, holding on to that and maintaining kind of where I was on the career ladder was really important long term, I think, for us and for our family. And so that was just, it was a very difficult decision from a financial standpoint because childcare is expensive. But we fortunately were in the position where we were able to actually make a decision, and our hand wasn't forced one way or the other. And yeah, it's the way that we kind of talked about it and thought about it was weighing the short term costs of, yep, several years of daycare is going to cost a lot, but hopefully in the long run, the place where I am in my career is going to make up for it.
Yeah, that's super helpful. The short term versus long term lens, I think, is a really good way to look at it. And I love that you added things like the 401k contributions and the other benefits, because that's oftentimes overlooked when people are doing a simple black and white equation of income is X and daycare is Y. And so, what's the difference there? So thanks for sharing. Okay, so you're continuing your postpartum journey. You have your what now, 5-month old in daycare, going through the struggles. You said you established a close relationship with the leader at the daycare center, the childcare center that your son goes to. Talk to me about that evolution, what you all talk about, and what you find very interesting. Other than that, it's directly applicable to your life.
Yeah, for sure. So I think things that I just didn't realize before becoming a parent and dealing with the childcare system is, especially for small centers like ours, no one is getting rich off of this. And I don't know who is, if anyone, but there's struggle on both sides of the parent side and of the provider side. Because, like I said, I mean, my center hasn't been above water since June of 2019. And the only reason they got through COVID was through government funding. But at the same time, parents are paying what feels like a really super exorbitant amount out of pocket. So I just don't think I understood that dynamic before becoming a parent and before becoming close with our childcare provider. And she's actually asked me several times to help interview staff because it's been a huge challenge. So yeah,
Mm.
I said it's two-sided, but really it's three-sided because the people that work at the centers too aren't making enough money. So it's just a convoluted ball of challenges that I don't it's not as straightforward in black and white, I think, as I assumed it was.
Yeah, that's helpful. It's like, so we have kind of these three entities, the providers, the parents, obviously, but then you throw the staff in there, which are absolutely essential. So you have these three different stakeholders where for all three of these, it sounds like the math ain't mathin'. And so what the heck do we do about that?
That's the question that we're asking ourselves, the question that we're asking every single day. Yeah, it's just been a struggle and we haven't found easy answers, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to keep trying.
Mhm.
So that's been a big push for me. I believe it was January. Yeah, it must have been January of the year after Liam was born, so 2023. Actually, there was kind of a desperate plea that went out on Reddit. It was a Reddit post saying, "Hey, are any other working parents dealing with the absolute insanity that is daycare? And can we please have a vent/struggle thread?" There have been lots of similar threads before, but for whatever reason, this is one that just kind of kicked off. And really, I feel like a lot of us bonded over that with a bunch of internet strangers, and that really started the campaign for childcare that I've been involved with. Now I think
Really?
since April after Liam was born. So.
Oh, that's so cool. That's like the epitome of like grassroots. And I love that it's like starting from a digital place too. Like
Mhm.
it seems obvious now because there's social media so prevalent, but when you think of like grassroots and nonprofits, you often think of like people physically together and more like marches and things like that. And so that's really cool that it started from a Reddit thread. So that was January 2023. How much do you think the impact of COVID, like, can you share any of either your personal thoughts and experience of a post-COVID world, or any insight that the campaign for childcare has on insights? Because I feel like it had an effect.
Oh, certainly. I think especially for childcare, like our center, a lot of centers relied on some sort of COVID-related assistance funding, and then in September of 2023, we saw what was called the childcare cliff, where a lot of that funding ended, and that was the only thing that was keeping so many centers afloat, and, that just kind of was a huge wave that resulted in center closures, obviously kids losing their spots, and then parents having to leave the workforce. So that was a huge kind of wrench that was thrown into the works in kind of a post COVID world. But then from a positive perspective, I think one thing that COVID at least did for me was it made me really want to reach out and seek connection with people, even again, just random people online. And I think that that actually has had a really big part in building the relationships and campaign for childcare because we really are digital. I mean, we're all over the country. A lot of us have never even met each other in person, but we really just were able to form really strong relationships online that I think the groundwork sort of was laid by the impacts of COVID and having to be physically distant from people.
Yeah. And so how does the campaign for childcare define the key challenges that families face today?
Affordability and accessibility are really the two. Yes, we absolutely know that affordability is a big challenge, but again, before becoming a parent, I don't think I was aware of how inaccessible childcare spots are as well. It's tied in with the affordability, it's tied in with how expensive it is to run a childcare program, but, even if I have a lot of friends in Massachusetts, for example, and they fortunately have jobs where they're able to afford childcare, but they're still unable to find a spot. So, like, what are you supposed to do
Mm,
in that instance? So, yeah,
mm.
really just improving both affordability and accessibility of childcare. And then we talked about other stakeholders, making sure that childcare providers are paid fairly and appropriately, because this is critical work that they're doing. And I don't think it's recognized as important enough in society.
I couldn't agree more. The staff at my son's daycare are just angels. Like they're just meant to be with children and to have the patience and to teach them. And so it's just such a unique skill set that needs to be valued. Okay, so I hear you on the accessibility and the affordability. Do you have any color on like why this is a unique situation for today? I think there's a lot of generational conversations and things are different generationally. So I'm sure there's a lot of different answers to this, but any insight from your perspective as to what makes it so unique of a challenge today?
One just internet quote that I've seen that kind of stuck with me is that our mothers prepared us that we could do anything, but then society wasn't prepared for the consequences of that. So I think it's just a whole lot of pushing things off, undervaluing women's work that has come to now catch up with us in today's day and age. We told women, hey, you can and should go to work and whatever. And that's excellent and I love that, but we haven't also then put the infrastructure in place to really ultimately support that. And again, it's kind of just relying on women and families to take on the burden themselves when I think can be more supported in other avenues through government support and funding, things like that.
Yeah. Okay, and so that was kinda my next question. Where does the Campaign for Childcare focus its, resources and efforts on making the change that will result in more accessibility and more affordability for childcare?
We have a twofold approach. We've been doing a lot of advocacy, speaking to federal government representatives. That was sort of our initial approach, and then the more we got into the work, and the more that we started talking with other groups who are working on the same issues, we also decided to focus some more things locally. Because sometimes it's easier to get in to talk to your local representatives. They have more of a, I guess, a stake in local issues. And if you can make it relatable to them, then they can also help sort of change the conversation and narrative overall. So yeah, we started off with federal push and we're still working on that, especially with elections coming up. We want to make sure that childcare reform is an issue that everyone's talking about because it's an issue that affects everyone, whether or not you realize it. But we're also starting local advocacy. For example, we actually just started a Pennsylvania chapter, our first ever state chapter in February of this year. So
Awesome.
that's we're hoping to take a two-pronged approach. But it's interesting because as much as we're an organization, we're also just moms and childcare providers doing this in the very limited time that we have. So it takes a lot of planning, I think, to be strategic with where we put our efforts because we know that we don't have a lot of time to spare. So
Right, it's almost like another thing, the working moms list to do, but also how else do we make change happen if we're
exactly.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, 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 I get that.
Some sleepless nights, but we'll make it happen.
Yeah, it's for the greater good, right?
Exactly. Yes.
So, childcare reform then is kind of the political phrase you would use to describe this advocacy work. Is there ways that people listening could get involved if they were interested?
Absolutely. So we're really building up our presence on social media. That's where we're able to get a lot of information out to people who are interested. Part of what I love about Campaign for Childcare is really the grassroots nature of it. You can come and go as you have time. Have all been there. We've all had busy seasons where we've had to take a step back. And so, yeah, it's really nice to be able to kind of get that information as you can take it in and be as involved as you can be. And one way is really just through our social media. So Instagram, we post a lot. It's just at Campaign for Childcare, and I'll make sure that you have links to this that you can
Yeah.
share with listeners. And then another thing in part of trying to formalize our structure, we actually are starting to do a membership drive and a membership pledge. Membership is free, and it really, as long as you hold our values that this is valuable work and that childcare should be affordable and accessible to all, then I really, would support signing the membership pledge. And that's another easy way that then you'll get information from us just to learn about upcoming actions and things like that. We've had kind of a really wide variety of actions that we've done, all the way from showing up in senators' offices in DC to simply writing Christmas cards to our representatives just to say, hey, these are the kids that live in your district. These are the kids that are impacted by the childcare crisis. Let's get on it.
That's great. Yeah, and we'll certainly link those when we promote this episode as well for anybody who's interested. So I'm curious, as you're working through this advocacy and in your experience, like what is the biggest pushback or hurdles that you're needing to overcome to enact change?
Money. I feel like a lot of the times it comes down to money. That's been something that we've heard from representatives is just, there's not enough money. And personally, my approach to that is yes, there is. You just need to work to look for it a little bit. So, one of our actions was actually called Budget Like a Mother. As parents, we're used to all the time sitting down, re-examining, looking at our budgets, finding money for things that are important from places where we didn't necessarily think it would come from. That's exactly what we're asking our representatives to do. The money's there. You just need to do work and figure out how to best apply it because this is a crisis that's affecting our economy and everybody in the country.
Yeah, I love that phrase, "the budget like a mother," and it my mind directly goes to it's, like, reflective of actually what life is like postpartum as a working mom of, like, it is so like, it's directly related. It's so obvious, but it just feels like budget like a mother, like, that's actually what we're doing when we're postpartum. We're trying to figure out, like, do I get any paid leave? Do I not? Like, do I get even any job security? Do I not? It's just so directly intertwined. I'm curious, apart from kind of advocacy in the political realm, are there other things that moms can do to help?
Absolutely. Yeah, so that's again one of my favorite things about Campaign for Childcare so far is any skill set, any skills that you bring to the table, anything that you enjoy doing, we will be able to use it in some way. And we always talk about these high versus low effort, high versus low impact sort of things when we're considering our actions. And honestly, so it's silly, but I have developed a love for Canva and like creating graphics and things like that. So that's something that I can easily do to support either Campaign for Childcare or the Pennsylvania chapter. Just make a quick graphic and be like, hey, our meeting is coming up on Tuesday at 8 p.m. Like, join us. Those types of things. It really can be something where if you have something that you enjoy and a skill set that you have, please come to the table. Even if you want to just learn and listen, from our conversations, that's awesome. We have people do that all the time and really just making sure that we get the message out to more people, that more people are aware of kind of the multifaceted, complex nature of this issue is perfect. It can be anything you want it to be, which is nice.
This feels like a silly question that I feel like I know the answer to, but I just want to confirm, are most of the folks helping with the campaign for childcare those that are mothers? And or do you
It's not a
have
silly question at all. So, yeah,
okay.
most are definitely mothers. We do have a fair number of childcare providers, but a good number of those are also mothers. We also actually have some grandparents or other mother figures, which is really amazing too. I love to see,
Mhm.
multiple generations or people that aren't traditionally defined as mothers necessarily are getting involved too. But yeah, a huge number of our involved members are moms themselves hoping to become moms in the future. We see a lot of, younger people saying, I definitely want to have kids and I do not want this to affect me. How do we make change? So it's great.
Mm. Yeah, the futurist. Okay, that's great. And so is there representation from staff at all?
Certainly, yeah, we have a lot of providers that, like I said, a fair number of them also overlap as being mothers. But yeah, we love to have the providers join us as well because they have a really unique perspective and input on it
Mhm.
that we don't necessarily have again as parents just dealing with the system.
What about, corporations?
That's one thing that we're really actually hoping to push for and in kind of our wanting to reshape the way that society thinks about families in general, but childcare specifically. We really want to engage corporations to say this is a good return on investment. This brings people into the workforce if you help support working parents through
Mhm.
childcare reform. So yeah, really wanting to make sure that businesses understand the impacts of the current childcare system and how they can and should get involved to push again for reform.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Awesome. All right. So anything else you want to share about the work that the Campaign for Childcare is doing?
Yeah, so I think just to reiterate, sort of with election season coming up, as much as we can be talking about childcare, how, so far it's sort of a failed system and it really needs a lot of help and effort from the candidates who are running. Make sure that they know it's important to us. That's really going to be huge for the upcoming election system or
And they can
upcoming election
yeah.
season. Sorry.
That's all right. No, and they can do that by letters, by
Absolutely. And
DMing them, like, what is there any, like, method that works best in your experience?
we've had a lot of success with repeated letters. Sometimes a one-off letter is easy to kind of ignore, but if you're able to send a couple different follow-up letters to be like, "Hey, I sent you this letter 2 weeks ago and never received a response. Like, what's going on?" That is great. That's a really easy way. Honestly, even just again, following Campaign for Childcare, we're going to have a lot of information about both high and low effort things that you can do. So speaking of, just pushing boundaries, I never thought I would waltz into a representative's office and be like, with my baby, be like, "Hey,
Hell
childcare's an
yeah.
issue," but I actually did, several times now. So you can do something as time intensive as doing that, or something as simple as, sitting down to write a letter. Even just sharing things on social media, I feel like has a big impact to, again, just raise awareness of how big of an issue this is, and how much we need to be talking about it.
I have such a wonderful vision of, as I'm looking at you and we're recording, like you bringing your son into, a regal government office and like like can we talk about that? Like how cool is that? And like how powerful do you feel that you're like, I matter. This is directly relating to my life and it needs to be improved. Like that is badass. That's cool.
I was so nervous when we went to DC. That was my first action with Campaign for Childcare. I'd really just gotten involved, and they said, "Hey, we're all doing like a caravan to DC. Do you want to come with us with your tiny baby?" And I was like, "Well, not really, but sure." so, so yep, strapped him in. I think it's like a 3.5 hour drive from where we live to DC. Marched him and his little stroller and 3,000 petition signatures from parents and childcare providers through, the
Amazing.
security, and ended up changing a couple diapers in senators' offices. So yeah, that was a wild day, but it was incredibly empowering. And yeah, it just showed me that I'm capable of doing things that I never really thought or realized. And it's not scary when you're supported by a group of like minded people.
Amazing. Amazing. Rachel, I'm so glad we got to chat with you today. And so thankful you were able to shine more of a light on the campaign for childcare. I think if we can continue to shine a light on the reality of the situation, like that's when we can work together to come up with solutions, hopefully, and move things forward. So thank you so, so much for sharing your perspective. And we are super excited to spread the word about the campaign for childcare.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a great conversation.
If you are currently expecting or just looking to plan ahead, check out perkyleave.com to learn more about your leave benefits. Moms with Benefits is chasing financial and emotional stability for motherhood. If you've resonated with any of the stories from our moms, we'd love for you to give us a rating and quick review to help spread the word. You'll also find Moms with Benefits on Instagram at momswithbenefits.org. Keep going and keep growing, Mama.